Good day, folks. It's Michael from Doom&Darkness. Sorry, wrong show. Just feeling a little under the equator. I mean weather this evening, but... Alright, first things first. New section. We have a list of the week. I like making lists, and I like talking about them, so this will be a regular segment. My last show was about Idoneth Deepkin, and we really got into them, but we mostly ignored the eels, so here's a list that has to do with them. You take a type of unit, or units, that appear underwhelming at first, or at least have big weaknesses, and build a list around accentuating their strengths. And a lot of times this really works very well. So we take the Fuithan Enclave, which lets you reroll hit rolls of 1 for Fuithan units on turn 2 and turn 4. And in the combat phase, you can reroll wound rolls of 1 for Fuithan mounts. And we have a lot of mounted guys, so this seems pretty good. Not going for the typical Morphan thing because we don't have any thralls, and not going for the Iron Rock thing because our allies don't really participate in melee combat, and I think the spellcasting is just fine for the aspect of the sea. So the general is Volturnos, High King of the Deep. He's the best value guy. We're not going for a Tidecaster general because we're not interested in this list anyway with turn 2 combos. We're not going to rush it. This is really for setting up the massive turn 3 play. We are still using a Tidecaster though because his spell is amazing, and his other spell, the lore spell, Tide of the Deeps, lets us get kind of tricky with kind of slingshotting Volturnos or the Eidolon, you know, wherever we need it to be. And, you know, speaking of slingshotting the Eidolon somewhere, we've given him the artifact Cloud of Midnight, which is sort of like, you know, Shadow Step or Vanish or something for rogues in World of Warcraft. You can use this to, you know, break glass in case of Eidolon about to die, or you can set up somewhat of a cheeky combo where you slingshot him to be the closest Idoneth Deepkin unit, so he's the only one that can be targeted, and then you use Cloud of Midnight during the ranged phase so that he can't be targeted. And since he is the closest, they kind of lose their entire ranged phase, which is pretty good. We've given him as a Lore of the Deep's Abyssal Darkness, which is the 10-inch radius gives cover save. And so this is sort of like our turtle of the list, is the Eidolon gets to radiate the cover aura, puts his save at a 2-up naturally, everybody else gets to benefit from it, and he can be the, you know, centerpiece that everybody follows around. Then we have 2 Knight Venators as allies, and I like Knight Venators as allies very much for the Idoneth Deepkin. They really fix a problem with the lists that I was building of Deepkin where, you know, you have this great sort of protection against ranged with Forgotten Nightmares, but you can't capitalize on it really in any meaningful way, as in, you know, what would be the best part about being super protected against ranged from your opponent? Why, if you had ranged yourself? And Deepkin just straight up don't. Your battle line archer guys are pretty bad. You know, really the only ranged you have in the army that's of any... Really, the only decent range in the entire army is on the back of the turtle, and it doesn't have a lot of shots, and it's, you know, pretty expensive centerpiece thing. And so with the 2 Knight Venators, we get a 30-inch range, which sort of protects them from the problem with allies in Deepkin, which is they don't have Forgotten Nightmares, and so they'll just get picked off. But at 30-inch range, and plus they got flying, they are pretty protected against that. So we get to snipe them, they can't snipe us. Win-win. Also, there's some pretty decent opportunity for conversions here. Like, you could turn the stupid bird into, like, a manta ray kind of floating around him, and, you know, you can get pretty creative with it. As far as units, we have 2 units of Echelon Guard, because we're going full cavalry here. I like the idea of almost everything in the army being 12-inch move with flying. That sounds very strong. And the 2 Echelon Guard, they're immune to rend, so you use them purely as a screen. You have these elite screens that are just moving up. And it's 2 units of 3 instead of 6, both to satisfy 3 battle line requirements. And anyway, if I'm going to have 6 of them as a screen, I'd rather like it as 2 units so that I can, you know, play around an opponent who's deploying pretty widely. And then we have 12 Akelian Morsar Guard. And these are the guys that, you know, really quite shit on when we when we first looked through the army list, because they're not Because if things are going well, they're good. And when things aren't going well, they're not good. And I tend not to like units that are sort of only worth it on the charge. But you can put yourself in a pretty unique situation, or a pretty privileged position in Deepkin, with how your tides work, and how Forgotten Nightmares works, and how you set up your army, and really how you play with them. They have a 14-inch move, they can reroll charges, and they fly. So really, you know, your work is cut out for you for getting these guys on the charge. And you have this biovoltaic blast for the, you know, perhaps once a game where, you know, someone really gets the drop on you. It's not very good in small numbers, but if you really stack it into a massive regiment, you can get your opponent for quite a shock. So once per battle at the start of any combat phase, so you can do this if your opponent charges into you and you can just blast them. You roll a d6 for each model in the unit, but critically, each model doesn't have to be close enough. It only has to be the unit that's close enough. So, you know, you're rolling 12 dice, doing mortal wounds on a 3-up, and on a 6-up, it's a d3 mortal wounds instead. And so you have really... So you have a pretty big blast defensively if you use it on your opponent's turn when they charge in. Of course, you can use it offensively as well. But, you know, with a regiment this huge, that's really... yeah, that's a significant amount of dice to be rolling. I don't much care for it when it's only a MSU or maybe a smaller unit, but the larger it gets, it really pays off. Alright, let's see, new comments. Tom Weber. Just wanted to say, really enjoying all your AOS content so far. Well, thanks, man. Appreciate it. You bring an interesting perspective for Magic the Gathering. Hope to keep it up. Am I planning to pick up Deepkin? I'm not. I made a rule for myself that I would keep it to 2 armies, and for the most part, I'm just waiting for an army cool enough to break the rule, or, you know, sell something else off. Deepkin are really fun to build lists for, and I really like their aesthetic a very great deal. All their heroes look fabulous. I really like how the thralls look. They're like Dark Eldar, and they look like they're straight out of Dune. It's just awesome. Really cool. I think all the eels look really dumb. For an elite, you know, cavalry battle line that you're probably going to want to use, like, that kind of ruins it for me. So they're not quite all there for me. I'm already playing a mixed order list, and if I got another army, I'd like to keep it to a new Grand Alliance for the most part. Although they are very cool. Like, they look great, except for the eels. Really fun to build lists for. Very interesting mechanics. I think the playstyle is very neat. It's sort of like a puzzle to solve, and I think a lot of people are going to be doing it wrong early. And it's, you know, kind of a reasonably elite army, which is what I tend to like, even though it's just a flat downside for the most part. If not, what other armies interest you at the moment? From previous videos, it seems like as a deck list building enthusiast, mixed order is great for you. Yeah, I think so. So many options to explore and combos to build, whereas many of the newer narrow armies have only a few relative prescriptive ways to play, which I assume you'd find boring. Not necessarily. There is a simple pleasure in having a plan and just following through with it like a well-oiled machine. I don't mind that at all, as long as it's fun. You know, how shall I put this? A lot of times you'll have a fairly restrictive list, as in like there's only one good list, but there are many ways to play it, and many decisions to make, and many options to do, you know, when you're on the table for tactics. And that can be fun as well. And who doesn't love just big and dumb, you know? Just like, you have the one combo, you just do it, it's really powerful, and it works. So, you know, I mean, I'm capable of enjoying a lot of stuff. As to other armies that interest me right now, I think Seraphon has a very interesting play style that I just really, it just seems awesome to play. You know, 1 or 2 teleports a turn, you can line up all these bad matchups for your opponent. You have a lot of units that have, you know, good parts and bad parts, and they have strengths and weaknesses, so as long as you line up your fights, you can do pretty well. And man, the freedom of teleports every turn, it's so tempting. I'm not the biggest fan of any of the models that are smaller than a, you know, than a Bastillodon. Saurus Guard and Skinks and Warriors and Pterodon Riders and Croxagore, I think they all look a bit derpy. And that pretty much keeps me away from Seraphon for the most part. Let's see, Stormcast I really like, but I have this big, like, huge conversion Stormcast project that I'm working on, where I'm giving them, I mean, they're getting custom armor, custom heads. I'm like sculpting stuff out of it. I'm putting them on attack bears instead of Dracoths. I'm switching out, I'm building them from different parts of other Storm. Like it's a fairly big ordeal, and so that one I'm mostly interested in it for the hobby aspect, and I'm probably going to sell it when I'm done. But the playstyle is okay. I mean, there's something to be said for just Mr. Reliable, you know? And that's what Stormcast is. Daughters of Cain seem really fun. I'd be excited to play them. A little spammy, if I'll be honest. As in, like, I'm pretty sure just 90 Witch Elves. Like, just 90 Witch Elves, 3 Hags, and a Slaughter Queen on Cauldron of Blood is probably the best way to play the thing. So maybe a little spammy, but Marathi is a very interesting model that I'd like to try out. There's so many ways, there's so many different ways to play her, I think, and I find that very interesting. I'm not entirely sure she's worth it for what she costs. And what a bizarre set of rules she has, but still, it's an interesting thing. Let's see what else. As for Chaos, Blades of Khorne is kind of interesting because all your guys look like, you know, Deathclock, the army, and that's cool. And I think there's a decent way to build a list out of Khorne, but it involves, in my opinion, it involves having 4 or 5 Slaughter Priests, and I think that they might do something with priests moving forward, so I'm going to wait on that. This is an army that I feel is at best maybe middle of the road, and it might be about to get nerfed, and so that's a bad place to be. And if I wanted like to be a Khorne army, I would just play Daughters of Cain, who do Khorne better. Sorry. Disciples of Tzeentch have, you know, obviously their rules are insane, and their playstyle is so good with so many options. I mean, they're one of the few armies that, for any weakness they happen to have, they just have a perfect counter to it, like, naturally in their army list. They're very easy to ally in. They're just so strong with so many options, and the dice roll thing is so broken. Just being able to set dice, you know, in a game of chance like this is far too powerful. It should be rerolls, just straight up. Not to mention the Balewind Vortex. So, like, I'm concerned that Tzeentch is going to receive, what, the 4th nerf? It's been nerfed every GHB, and it's still the best army. So, I mean, it was crazy before. My problem with it is I think all of the models look aggressively stupid. Just like wiggly, goofy, you know, pink and blue, like, flamey turd-looking thing. I mean, like, Ogroid Thaumaturge looks awesome. You know, Lord of Change looks okay, I guess. Gaunt Summoner is pretty cool, but, like, for the most part, it's just, like, wiggly, multicolored beast creatures that I'm not down with. Yeah, the model range turns me off hugely, and I'll be constantly scared of nerfs, since they're the best. And you don't want to always be, you know, looking over your shoulder, like, dreading the next GHB is going to ruin everything, you know, so... Maggotkin of Nurgle is a very exciting army. Very exciting. All the new models are so wonderful. The Great Unclean One, like, first of all, I'm not a fan of the, you know, gross, kind of disgusting stuff. But even though I'm not a fan of it, I simply have to say that, like, new Great Unclean One, Puscoil Blight Lords, like, these models are just absolutely fantastic, and it'd be a joy to paint them and play with them. Rodigus has awesome rules. I want to use his spell, you know, the standard Great Unclean One with the bell and the sword sounds great. Like, building army lists is very fun out of this army. You know, Plague Bearers of Nurgle, I think, just look like piles of crap, but they're supposed to. They're sort of literally made out of it sometimes. And I think Plague Drones of Nurgle are actually probably the most underrated unit in the army. I think they're very strong. They can absorb some very strong synergies from it. Their book has very expensive battalions, which preclude you from being able to do everything you want in a list. which is by design. Like, the whole point is that you can't do everything you want so that there's a diversity in builds. And the playstyle just seems really fun. My problem with Nurgle is that it's kind of like Maverick in Magic the Gathering Legacy, or Blaverick, I suppose, once Deathrite Shaman came out, i.e. a little on the slow side, but tons of utility, and everything is just so solid. And you have all these little tricks to pull, and you have 2 different, you know, silver bullet locators. But the problem is, you only play it if you actually are going to be a Maverick by playing it. And Nurgle mirror matches, I've seen some, are just total AIDS. Like, to watch, it's so cancerous. Like, nobody ever dies. It's so stupid. So, like, you know, me not being down with the whole gross thing so much, and the oppressive mirror matches kind of keep me away from the army. But that being said, they're probably the army I'm most excited about playing that I wouldn't play, I guess. Death. Legions of Nagash is awesome. I would definitely play it. I'd play a Nagash list, Grand Host, and it'd be tons of fun. Or maybe like Archon plus, you know, Prince Verdry. And I like Prince Verdry more than Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, even though everyone else likes Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon better because you can give him an artifact. I'll take Verdry because he's so much killier. He has so much more damage that it's really not even close. Verdry kind of has the Legion of Blood bonuses baked into him, whereas the Vampire Lord has to absorb them from being Legion of Blood. So in a Grand Host army, Verdry punches above his weight class, which is admittedly expensive. I do like Morghasts as well. Normally I would not, but in a Grand Host army, the Halberd ones hit 4 times instead of 3, and that actually puts them up to being worth it for 220 for me. I know they're fragile. Like, I know they're fragile for their points and have a lot of wounds and they have a 4-up save, but, man, with 3d6 charges, not 3d6 drop the lowest, just 3d6, you can just regularly be making these 9 and 10 inch charges, like, so easily, coming out of nowhere. They have flying. And obviously the Morghast Archai with the Mortal Wound save are pretty cool with Nagash in a first cohort where you can, like, you know, kind of shrug the wounds off onto them and get another save. But that's like, dude, it's like 800 for Nagash, it's 220 for the Archais, it's 160 for the first cohort. Like, how many points exactly are you paying for just keeping Nagash alive? I think it's a little too much. But no, I'd be very excited to play Death, but currently I'm collecting and, like, painting my friend's Death army. So, like, I'm going to get to play against it all the time, and I'm going to get, like, all my hobby enjoyment out of it already. So, that's what would stop me there. There aren't really other Death armies for the most part. I suppose there's Flesh Eater Courts, but they're, like, almost as bad as Beastclaw Raiders. And, just having the best fluff in the game isn't enough to save them, because they're not very interesting, they're not very good. I think all the ghoul models look stupid, and the, like, Geists and stuff look too spindly. I don't like Crypt Flayers or anything. Like, just, honestly, the entire model range is bad, in my opinion. And finally, Destruction. Beastclaw Raiders. These guys look awesome. So much character. They have everything. Huge beasts, 9-foot tall ogres, a lot of characterful poses and models and stuff. Armor, fur, skin, weapons, leather, you know, bones everywhere. Just excellent looking. Unfortunately, their rules are really garbage. And they got nerfed real bad in the last GHB, as well as the game's rules being changed in a way that nerfed them even harder from a different angle. And then most of the battle plans requiring numbers for objectives hurt them even yet more. And their worst matchups are people who run a lot of bodies, and people have been running more and more bodies. And so it's just like, you know, they're brutal. And newer players or hyper elite armies lose hard to Thundertusk, and everybody else crushes it. So you're never in a good position. Either you're beating noobs and making them feel bad, or you're getting fucking smashed, so there's no in between. Ironjawz look really cool as well. I'm a fan of Megaboss on Maw Crusher. I'm a fan of Gore Grunter Riders. They look great. Brutes look awesome. I don't like what Ardboys look like at all, though, and this almost kills it for me. Weird distended stomachs and stupid butts and stuff, and I think they're a sleeper hit for a really good unit in the army. Plus the rules are really lackluster and random. They're frustratingly working on 6s only for stuff, and like the army isn't amazing, and then they have all these downsides. It's not okay. And no other destruction armies have gotten a proper release, but they universally either look really stupid or have bad rules, or both. I'm looking at you, every type of Grots. So yeah, those are like the armies those are the armies in the game that I'm thinking about, or that I'm interested in some way. Oh yeah, I suppose I could talk about, you know, mixed chaos, or mixed death, or mixed destruction. Mixed destruction, nope. Moving on. Mixed death is Legions of Nagash, and it's very good. And mixed chaos could be pretty cool, but I would just be too tempted to keep using, like, Zench stuff. I think giving up Zench's allegiance abilities isn't worth going mixed. And any boxes you're trying to check by making a mixed army list, you could just play Zench instead and you're better. And I find that annoying from a list building standpoint, and so I probably wouldn't do something like Doom&Darkness, man. You know, do some like mixed chaos thing like Doom&Darkness is doing. But yeah, it could be fun, but I would be constantly pushed towards the good stuff. Like, for instance, in Grand Alliance Order, my mixed order list, like, my army would just be better if I was using Volkite Berserkers and a Runesmith. Or a Runesmiter, I mean. The teleport guy. Like, if all my battle line were just 30 Volkite Berserkers and, like, a Runesmiter, so I had, like, 2 of those, you know, and then 1 Arcanaut Company, and fill the rest of the army up with whatever the fuck, like, it's just better than what I'm doing now. But I'm not doing that because I don't like how Fireslayers look. I think they look dumb. So, you know, it's sort of the same thing for Chaos, except Zench is even more a little, like, heads and shoulders above everything else. So anyway, I didn't mean for the answer to your question to take forever, but hey, we got a show to run. Let's put some content in there. Alright, more recent news. Warhammer Legends is announced. Warhammer Legends is here. I'm reading this off the community site. Home for models from yesteryear, featuring rules for using champions and regiments from the world it was. In your narrative and open play, stopped reading there. No, I'm joking, but, you know, of course they have points, so you can have fair games. Oh, they don't. Whatever resources they spent to do this were totally wasted. Like, why did Age of Sigmar fucking suck when it came out? Because it had no points, and it wasn't a proper game. And so it was just the most casual kiddie shit where you painted your guys and just shoved them around. Like, people came up with points on their own because you need that for a game like this. And so making the same mistake twice seems to me pretty annoying. They could have gone back and given a real army something to play with in a proper game. Instead, they made interesting rules. Instead, a team made a whole bunch of war scrolls without points and kind of wasted everyone's time. Yeah, I'm not pleased. I don't know why they did this. Like, my friend was so excited to hear about this, and then I'm like, you know, they're not going to have points because I saw the article, right? And he's like, what? His shoulders slumped, and he walked back into his room, and that was it. His excitement was gone. Like, that's the average reaction to this, is excitement, and then realizing they don't have points and you can't play them in real games, disappointment, and then never looking at them again. Like, narrative and open play, they'll ignore any rule they feel like and make up new ones for fun and exciting adventures. But if it doesn't have that baseline of, like, properly works in the game, It doesn't have legitimacy, and it doesn't hit the table for the vast majority of players. It's like you're wasting time. I thought you guys were, I don't know, just when you think they're learning from their mistakes, they go and do something like this, which is sort of like a microcosm of what happened in the original Age of Sigmar release. Just bizarre, just very strange. I don't get their decision to do this. Like, I'm not even going to go through the War Scrolls, because what's the point? Because you can't play them. I feel like this isn't, I don't think, match play chauvinism, and you can tell me if it is in the comments with a interesting angle or something. Like, every release doesn't have to be for matched play specifically, like new battle plans or competitive stuff or whatever. But it should be able to be playable in it. Because if it's playable in matched play, you can take it and it disperses down into narrative and open play and any other way you want to play the game. But if it's only playable in open, there's a ceiling it hits, and then just that's it. It's like you put a new release in a prison if it's only for narrative and play, because it can't go up from there.